Hey strangers, it's good to see you again. I don't know if everybody's aware. In case you're not, I both write and record all the stories on this channel. And all of the stories, minus details changed to protect the innocent and not so innocent, are true. That being said, there is a world of difference between writing me and reading me. Reading me is a logical, rational adult who pays her taxes on time. Writing me is a goblin that gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning and writes whatever her diseased dreams have spat up. Suffice it to say, while the stories come from me, sometimes they surprise me. And this is one of those. Say hello to story number 74, which actually has a title, but I'm going to tell you about it after. I'm a girl, and I grew up in Indiana. I was about 4 or 5 when this took place. I was bog standard in every way. I had brown hair. I had a buckshot of freckles across my nose. And I had socks that were perpetually one pulled up, one puddled around my ankle. Essentially, any generic child you'd see in the background of a Norman Rockwell, just updated for that tasteful 1980s fashion. But I tell you this in hopes that you understand how perfectly ordinary I was. I was the opposite of standing out in a crowd. Further, the event took place at a birthday party held by one of the other kids in my first grade class. The party was held at a restaurant with an outdoor play area. His mother had decorated the place in streamers and balloons. She brought a cake and hired a clown. It wasn't a large restaurant, and a lot of parents, including mine, stuck around. But as a guest at this party, and not, in fact, the birthday girl, I blended in with the other kids as the non-playable characters of the event. Like the bystander effect, I think when several kids gather to be noisy and raucous and behave like hyperactive goblins, there's a sense of, one of the other adults will see to them. That's how I think the man in the blue shirt finally picked me out of the throng of kids. Or maybe I was just the first girl to lock eyes with him as he glanced around, casting his gaze across the playground like a fishing lure. Regardless, it was me who returned his gaze. And when he motioned me over, I trotted to him obediently. I assumed he was someone's dad, and thus had that sort of delegated parent authority to summon me like babysitters have. When I approached him, he bent down and asked me, "Hi, sweetie. Are you having a good time?" I nodded yes. Wanting to get back to my friends, I looked over my shoulder. As I was looking away, he used the hand he'd used to motion me to come to him to grab onto my own hand. I looked back to the man, surprised. He told me that he had a big present for the birthday kid, then asked if I could help him carry it. He told me it was in his car trunk and would just take a second. I was a little disconcerted by the fact that he'd taken my hand, so he shook it, tightening his fingers over mine, saying, "Come on, be a good helper." Well, he was someone's dad. Or maybe uncle, right? He didn't seem creepy or dangerous.
He'd been mixed in with the group of parents standing near the picnic tables, and none of them had tossed him out. And as a kid, you're kind of in this mode for if an adult tells me to do a thing, I had better do it, or I'll be in trouble. On the other hand, if I helped, well, that was the opposite of being in trouble. While I was reluctant to leave the party and my friends, this nice man said it was to get a gift out of the car, and then we'd be right back to the party. That's why, shooting only a couple of glances back, he began to lead me from the restaurant to the adjacent car park. But then, I saw the clown coming back out from the kitchen area. The clown was holding a stack of paper plates and a long, silver knife. He began to cut the cake, and this is when my kid brain interjected. I was in danger of missing out on cake. That's what had me stopping and trying to pull my hand from the man's grasp. I told him that they're cutting the cake. Let me go. The man turned, but his placid, normal expression from before was gone. I can still see that mask of rage when I close my eyes and think on it. The other details are a bit fuzzy due to trauma and kid memory, but that only serves to drop his snarling face into uncanny valley territory. Even now, thinking back to his face in that moment, I get full-body goosebumps. I screeched, beginning to cry in surprise and fright from his angry face. I jerked my body like a dog playing tug-of-war. I was trying to look to the party, look for anyone who was turned in our direction and could see what was happening. The first glance back to the group was a blur, reds and navy blues of the restaurant's exterior. Then, as though my vision was an up-and-coming cameraman, my memory plays a blur as I look back to the man holding my hand, who was at this point clenching his teeth, re-steadying his feet from my frantic jerking and flailing. He was trying to hook his free hand around the hand already holding my wrist. It was clamped so painfully tight on my wrist, it left me sobbing. With both hands now firmly clenched over mine, he tugged me towards him. I was pulled towards him so hard I nearly lost my balance. But I managed to catch myself, replant my feet, and fling my body back and away from him to get another chance to look back to the party. But as I looked back to them, desperate to catch someone, anyone's eye, all I saw were their backs. They were all facing the cake cutting. I was losing steam fast. I remember my lungs beginning to hammer in my chest, the pain there mixed with the pain of my wrist and now shoulder. My shoulder felt like it would pop off of me, like a doll with detachable arms. My dismay at missing cake had been squashed by the tardy red alarms of stranger danger. The realization that this man wanted to take me was setting in. I know I was trying to scream, but top volume wasn't an option with my lungs. They were already battered by my crying and frantic animal-in-a-trap body spasms as I tried to pull back away from him. I couldn't be loud enough to be heard by the party. I felt the soles of my shoes drag as he successfully hauled me farther and farther from the party. Then, over the man's low, angry voice, saying things like, "Be quiet," and "Stop that," I heard it. A loud, clear voice cut over the din of the crowd. the excited kids clamoring for cake, my own fading cries. Sudden and clear as a trumpet blast, I heard someone yell,
"Hey, what are you doing?"
It must have caught my would-be kidnapper off guard. He didn't let go of me, but my shoes stopped skidding as his pulling at me also stopped. I launched myself backwards once again, turning to see who'd finally noticed. It was the one person facing our direction. He'd had his back to the restaurant to face the crowd and cut the cake. His face was white, save 2 spots of color on his cheeks, blue half-circle eyebrows, and his big, red-lined mouth painted into a wide smile that looked bizarre, with his mouth as wide open as it was. And thank God, he was looking right at us. I remember trying to cry out for him to help me, please help me. But by that point, I'd be surprised if I could have managed a normal speaking voice. Everything hurt. My chest felt locked, crushed, my lungs tapped and struggling to refill. My arm was in agony, a line of Christmas tree lights burning pain in every muscle from shoulder to wrist. My neck strained from trying to both jerk away from the man and crane to see the crowd behind us, as though my eyes could communicate what my voice and whole body couldn't. And maybe it worked, because before the man could gather himself enough to explain it away, do that grown-up thing of somehow always being right and the kid always being wrong, the one person to see me was already strafing around the table, rushing towards us. Still holding the long silver knife, the party clown charged. I felt the man freeze as the hand locked on my wrist loosened. I assume he'd released his other hand from atop it, holding it out as though he were a cop directing traffic, warding the clown away with a stop gesture. But that's a guess. I couldn't tear my eyes away from my hero, running full tilt to us, baggy silk costume flapping, oversized blue shoes making a ka-thwack sound as his heel would hit the ground, followed by the flipper-like toe box. Have you ever tried to run in flippers? It's hard as hell. And that explains how he tripped, falling forward, his hands coming out in front to catch himself. One hand empty, the other still armed with a knife now coated in cake frosting. Like a guided missile, the blade connected at the juncture of the man's hand and my wrist, topside, on the forearm. It was dull, but the weight of the tumbling clown drove it deep enough to cut, and blood flew. The man released my wrist with a cry. I fell towards the party, no longer supported by his pulling. An angry red line welled up blood on my arm, but I couldn't feel any of it. My eyes were locked on the bright, rainbow-costumed body colliding with the man as they both fell to the ground. Someone was yelling. A lot of someones were yelling. Then I felt 2 hands clasp on my waist as an adult, my mom, picked me up, pulling me away from the man and the clown, now tussling on the ground. Then a rush of more grown-ups blocked my view as they joined the fracas, and my face was turned to my mom's. Her face looked like the clown's. That's what I remember. This was the early 90s, so her blue-green eyeshadow, Hot pink blush and matching lipstick were more in line with fashion than the circus. But her face was so pale, her eyes wide, lips looking impossibly stretched as she gaped at me in terror. I buried my face in her shirt and sobbed. I don't remember much else about that day. The police were there at some point. A nice lady, either an EMT or a cop, bandaged my arm after telling my mom I was lucky. The cut wasn't as deep as it could have been. Kids kept coming over to peer at me, clumsily pat at me, saying, "Sorry you got hurt," over and over. The man in the blue shirt who had tried to take me was arrested and taken away in a cop car. For all of this, I was clamped to my mom, legs and arms unwilling to let her go. But when I saw them taking my hero, I sprang away from my mom. I bolted to him, afraid that the police were also arresting him for the cut on my wrist. The policeman explained that the party clown was not in trouble. They just needed to talk to him. They made a big show of not putting the clown in handcuffs. By now, he'd removed the frizzy blue wig and his makeup was surely smeared. But, in my little kid memory, he looked perfect. So, there you have it. A story about a clown armed with a knife who wasn't the bad guy. I've asked my mom about this since, but there wasn't much to tell. The man who tried to take me had a record. It took months for them to bring him up to trial, at which he pled guilty and went back to jail. I still have a small scar on my wrist from that day, and to this day, when somebody starts talking about guardian angels, I picture a clown with a knife.
This story was literally called Clown with a Knife. Usually they don't have titles, just a number. I guess writing me thought that that was important. At any rate, thank you so much for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, notify, and have a brilliant day. Take care, strangers.